In a small, peaceful town where everyone knew each other by name, there lived a woman named Sarah Parker. She had moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago, and from the very beginning she kept mostly to herself. People often saw her tending to her garden or jogging early in the morning. Her polite smiles and occasional small talk gave no hint that she led anything but an ordinary life. But behind those calm eyes and friendly gestures lay secrets. Secrets so deep that they could change everything. Sarah's house was one of the neatest on the block. It was a modest little home with white walls, flower boxes under the windows, and a perfectly trimmed lawn. Neighbors liked her because she seemed kind and approachable, though distant. Some thought she might be shy or just preferred solitude. Others speculated that she was dealing with personal struggles, maybe a broken heart or a tough divorce. No one ever guessed the truth, that Sarah wasn't who she claimed to be. You see, Sarah wasn't just another quiet resident trying to blend in. She was actually an undercover FBI agent working on a highly sensitive mission. Her real name wasn't even Sarah Parker. It was Agent Emily Hayes. For months she had been living this double life, pretending to be someone else while gathering evidence against a dangerous criminal network operating right under their noses. The operation began when federal agents discovered suspicious activity tied to several local businesses in the area. Money laundering, illegal smuggling, and connections to organized crime were all part of the puzzle. At first glance, the town looked like any other sleepy suburb, but beneath its surface lurked something darker. That's why the FBI decided to send in one of their best agents, Emily, now known as Sarah, to infiltrate the group and bring them down. Her assignment was clear: gain the trust of key players, gather enough evidence to make arrests, and ensure the entire operation was dismantled. To do this, she needed to become invisible, blending seamlessly into the fabric of the community, and for the most part, she succeeded. Over time, she became just Sarah, the neighbor who baked cookies during the holidays and waved hello during evening walks. No one questioned her too much. After all, everyone has secrets, right? But being undercover wasn't easy. Every day was a balancing act. On one side, she played the role of a regular person, attending neighborhood gatherings, chatting about mundane topics like weather and gardening, and maintaining a low profile. On the other side, she was constantly monitoring conversations, taking mental notes and sending encrypted reports to her handler. Her laptop, which she used for both work and personal tasks, became her lifeline to the outside world. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah would sit at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the screen as she typed up detailed accounts of her findings. She documented every interaction, every clue, every piece of information that could help crack the case wide open. Yet, despite her professionalism, there were moments when doubt crept in. Was she doing enough? Had she missed something important? What if someone figured out her true identity? Still, she pressed on, knowing that failure wasn't an option. This wasn't just about catching criminals, it was about protecting innocent people. If the network remained active, more lives would be at risk. So Sarah pushed aside her fears and focused on the task at hand. She attended local events, joined book clubs, and even volunteered at charity drives, all in an effort to get closer to the people she suspected of wrongdoing. One of these individuals was Mark Dawson, a charming businessman whose company was rumored to be involved in shady dealings. He was well liked in the community, always hosting barbecues and organizing fundraisers. To the untrained eye, he appeared harmless, a pillar of the neighborhood. But Sarah noticed things others didn't, like how he often spoke in vague terms, dropping hints about opportunities without giving specifics, or how certain guests at his parties seemed unusually nervous, glancing over their shoulders, as if expecting trouble. Mark quickly took an interest in Sarah, inviting her to join various activities and introducing her to his inner circle. At first she hesitated, unsure whether getting too close was wise. But her handler urged her to take the risk, reminding her that gaining access to Mark's network was crucial. Slowly but surely, Sarah earned his trust, becoming a familiar face at his gatherings. As weeks turned into months, Sarah grew more confident in her role. She learned how to navigate the delicate balance between curiosity and caution, asking questions without appearing too eager, She befriended some of Mark's associates, including Ryan, a quiet man who rarely spoke unless spoken to. There was something unsettling about Ryan. He had sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything, and he never smiled. Still, Sarah made sure to include him in conversations, making light jokes and offering compliments whenever possible. Despite her growing confidence, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Occasionally, she'd catch glimpses of unfamiliar cars parked near her house or spot strangers lingering around the corner store. Were they connected to Mark's operation? Or was it mere coincidence? She couldn't be sure, but the paranoia gnawed at her, keeping her alert at all times. To stay safe, Sarah adopted routines designed to throw off anyone following her. She varied her jogging routes, switched grocery stores randomly, and avoided using her phone for anything related to the case. She also installed hidden cameras around her property, ensuring she had eyes everywhere. These measures helped ease her anxiety, but they couldn't eliminate the constant tension of living a lie. Yet, through it all, Sarah remained committed to her mission. She reminded herself why she had chosen this path in the first place: to serve justice, to protect others, and to prove that even in the darkest corners of society, hope still existed. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to gather valuable information. Little did she know, however, that her greatest test was yet to come, and when it did, it would push her to the brink of disaster. For now, though, Sarah continued playing her part, waiting patiently for the moment when she could strike. Until then, she was just another quiet neighbor, blending into the background unnoticed by those around her. But deep down, she knew the truth. Sooner or later, her cover would be blown. And when that happened, she hoped it wouldn't be too late. As weeks turned into months, Sarah's life became a delicate balancing act. On the surface, she was still the quiet, unassuming neighbor who attended local events and exchanged pleasantries with people on the street. But beneath that calm exterior, her world was anything but ordinary. Every interaction, every conversation, and every decision carried weight. It wasn't just about fitting in anymore. It was about survival. Sarah had grown accustomed to living two separate lives. By day, she played the role of an average resident, watering her plants, chatting casually with neighbors, and occasionally volunteering at community activities. By night, however, she transformed into Agent Emily Hayes, poring over documents, analyzing patterns, and sending encrypted updates to her handler. Her kitchen table doubled as both a workspace and a sanctuary where she could think clearly without distractions. The only constant companion during these late hours was her coffee mug, refilled countless times as she worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle before her. But the longer she stayed under cover, the harder it became to maintain her cover. There were moments when cracks began to show, tiny slips that made her question whether anyone had noticed. For instance, there was the time she accidentally referred to herself as Emily while signing up for a neighborhood book club. Thankfully, she caught herself mid-sentence, blaming it on fatigue and quickly correcting herself. No one seemed to pay much attention, but the incident left her shaken. It served as a stark reminder of how fragile her disguise truly was. Her anxiety spiked whenever she interacted with Mark Dawson, the charismatic businessman whose company was at the center of the investigation. Mark was charming, intelligent, and dangerously perceptive. He had a way of making people feel seen, as if he understood their deepest thoughts and fears. This trait made him both fascinating and terrifying to Sarah. While she appreciated his ability to draw others out, she couldn't help but wonder if he saw through her carefully constructed facade. Mark frequently invited Sarah to gatherings at his house, which doubled as networking events for his associates. At first, she hesitated to attend, fearing that getting too close might expose her vulnerabilities. However, her handler insisted that gaining access to Mark's inner circle was essential to cracking the case. So, Sarah accepted the invitations, forcing herself to smile and mingle despite the knot of unease tightening in her stomach. During one such gathering, Sarah found herself seated next to Ryan, Mark's quiet but observant associate. Unlike Mark, who thrived on socializing, Ryan preferred to stay in the background watching and listening. His piercing gaze unnerved her, especially when he asked probing questions about her past. "So, Sarah," he said casually, leaning back in his chair, "what brought you to this little town? You don't strike me as someone who enjoys small-town life." For a brief moment, Sarah froze. She had rehearsed answers to questions like this countless times, but something about Ryan's tone set off alarm bells in her mind. Was he testing her? Or was it simply idle curiosity? Taking a deep breath, she smiled warmly and replied, "Oh, I needed a change of pace after things didn't work out in the city. Sometimes starting fresh is exactly what you need." Her response sounded convincing enough, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan wasn't entirely convinced. The encounter left Sarah rattled. Over the next few days, she replayed the conversation in her head, dissecting every word and gesture for signs of suspicion. Had she said too much or not enough? Did Ryan suspect something, or was she letting paranoia get the better of her? These questions haunted her, making it difficult to focus on her mission. Despite her growing unease, Sarah knew she couldn't afford to pull back now. The stakes were higher than ever. Just days before the barbecue, she had uncovered a crucial piece of evidence linking Mark's business to illegal arms shipments. Hidden among invoices and financial records was a coded reference to upcoming deliveries scheduled for later that week. If she could confirm the details, it would provide the FBI with the smoking gun they needed to shut down the entire operation. Determined to press forward, Sarah decided to take a calculated risk. She volunteered to help organize a charity event, hosted by Mark's company, knowing it would give her access to confidential documents stored in his office. Late one evening, while pretending to tidy up after the event, she slipped into his private workspace. Her hands trembled slightly as she rifled through drawers and folders, searching for anything incriminating. Each second felt like an eternity, her ears straining for any sound that might indicate someone was approaching. Finally, her efforts paid off. She found a ledger detailing transactions linked to offshore accounts, a treasure trove of information that could unravel the entire network. As she flipped through the pages, adrenaline surged through her veins. She snapped photos of the ledger with her phone, careful not to leave any trace of her presence. Just as she finished, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Panicked, Sarah ducked behind the desk, clutching the device tightly. To her relief, the intruder turned out to be Ryan, muttering to himself about misplaced files before leaving. Once the coast was clear, Sarah returned the ledger to its original spot and crept back to the main room. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from exhilaration. She had done it. She had what she needed to expose the network. But even as she celebrated this victory, a nagging thought lingered in the back of her mind. Every second she stayed in the lion's den brought her closer to being caught. Over the following days, Sarah reviewed the photos she had taken, cross-referencing them with other pieces of evidence she had gathered. The picture was becoming clearer. Mark's company wasn't just laundering money. It was part of a larger criminal enterprise involved in smuggling weapons and drugs. The scale of the operation shocked her, but it also reinforced her resolve. She couldn't let these people continue wreaking havoc unchecked. However, her success came at a cost. The more information she uncovered, the more she realized how deeply entrenched the network was within the community. Friends, acquaintances, and even some authority figures appeared to be complicit in the scheme. It was disheartening to think that the people she passed on the street every day were connected to such corruption. Yet Sarah reminded herself that exposing the truth was worth the sacrifice. Justice demanded it. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table reviewing the latest intel, Sarah heard a faint knock at her door. Startled, she glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Who could be visiting at this hour? Cautiously, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. Standing outside was Ryan, his expression unreadable. Her pulse quickened. What did he want? And why was he here? Summoning her courage, Sarah opened the door slightly, feigning confusion. "Ryan? Is everything okay?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Ryan hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I just wanted to check on you," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. "You've been acting different lately. Thought maybe something was bothering you." Sarah forced a laugh, brushing off his comment. "Different? Me? Nah, I'm fine. Just tired, that's all. Thanks for checking, though." She gave him a reassuring smile, hoping he wouldn't press further. Ryan studied her for a moment longer before nodding. "All right then. See you around, Sarah." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Closing the door, Sarah leaned against it, exhaling sharply. That encounter confirmed her worst fears. Ryan was suspicious. Whether he suspected her true identity, or merely sensed that something was off, she couldn't say. But one thing was certain. She was running out of time. If she didn't act soon, the cracks in her facade would widen and her cover would crumble completely. As she returned to her seat at the kitchen table, Sarah stared at the photos on her laptop screen. They represented months of hard work, sleepless nights, and countless sacrifices. Now more than ever, she needed to stay focused. Failure wasn't an option, not when so many lives depended on her success. Yet, deep down, she couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of dread creeping into her thoughts. What if her efforts weren't enough? What if, despite everything, she failed? Only time would tell. The discovery of Ryan's growing suspicion sent Sarah spiraling into a whirlwind of fear and determination. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow moving outside her window, and every unexpected knock on her door felt like a ticking time bomb. She knew she couldn't afford to let her guard down, not for a single moment. Yet, at the same time, pulling out of the mission wasn't an option either. The FBI needed concrete evidence to dismantle the entire operation, and Sarah was their best chance of getting it. With renewed resolve, she decided to push forward, even if it meant playing a more dangerous game. Over the next few days, Sarah doubled down on gaining Mark and Ryan's trust. She volunteered for tasks that would keep her close to them, knowing that staying visible was key to maintaining her cover. At first, this strategy seemed to work. Mark continued inviting her to events, treating her like one of his trusted confidants. Ryan, however, remained distant and watchful, his sharp eyes following her every move. It was as though he were waiting for her to slip up, to reveal the truth hidden beneath her carefully constructed persona. Sarah's unease grew when Mark announced plans for another charity gala, an event designed to raise funds for local schools but rumored to be a front for laundering money. "We'd love your help organizing it, Sarah," Mark said with his trademark charm during a casual conversation at the coffee shop. "You've got such great attention to detail." Though part of her wanted to decline, Sarah forced herself to smile and nod. "Of course, I'd be happy to help," she replied, keeping her tone light and enthusiastic. Inside, her stomach churned. This gala wasn't just another opportunity to gather information. It was also a potential trap. If Ryan or anyone else suspected her true identity, this could be the moment they chose to act. As the date of the gala approached, Sarah threw herself into preparations, attending meetings and coordinating logistics with Mark and his team. During these sessions, she listened intently, picking up fragments of coded conversations about upcoming shipments and financial transactions. Each piece of information added fuel to the fire burning inside her, a mix of excitement and dread. Excitement because she was closer than ever to exposing the network. Dread because each clue brought her deeper into the lion's den. On the night of the event, Sarah arrived early, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown that allowed her to blend seamlessly into the crowd. The venue was a grand ballroom adorned with twinkling lights and fresh flowers, creating an atmosphere of elegance and sophistication. Guests mingled freely, sipping champagne and discussing charitable causes, while behind the scenes, something far darker unfolded. Sarah used the chaos of the evening to her advantage. While others were distracted by speeches and auctions, she slipped away from the main hall and made her way toward Mark's office. Earlier that week, she had overheard Ryan mention a secure document containing details about the next shipment. If she could get her hands on it, it would provide irrefutable proof of the network's illegal activities. Her heart raced as she entered the dimly lit room, locking the door behind her. Moving quickly, she searched through drawers and cabinets, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped through papers. Just as frustration began to set in, she spotted a locked briefcase tucked under the desk. Using tools she always carried in her clutch, a tiny lock-picking kit disguised as makeup, she managed to open it. Inside, she found exactly what she was looking for: a folder filled with detailed instructions for the upcoming arms shipment, including dates, locations, and contact names. Her breath caught in her throat as she snapped photos of the documents with her phone. As she worked, she heard muffled voices approaching from the hallway. Panic surged through her veins. Someone was coming. Thinking fast, Sarah slid the folder back into the briefcase and returned it to its hiding spot. She ducked behind the desk just as the door opened. To her horror, it was Ryan. He stepped inside, muttering to himself about misplaced files before turning on a lamp. For several agonizing moments, Sarah held her breath, praying he wouldn't notice her. Finally, after searching briefly, he left, closing the door behind him. Once the coast was clear, Sarah crept out of the office and rejoined the party, slipping back into her role as though nothing had happened. No one seemed to suspect a thing. But as she circulated among the guests, exchanging pleasantries and pretending to enjoy herself, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan's presence earlier hadn't been coincidental. Had he followed her? Was he testing her loyalty? The rest of the evening passed in a blur. By the time the gala ended, Sarah was physically and emotionally drained. Back at her house, she uploaded the photos to the FBI database, breathing a sigh of relief as she hit send. For the first time since starting the mission, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could wrap this up soon and return to a normal life. But fate had other plans. 2 days later, Sarah received a call from her handler, Agent Harris. His voice was tense as he warned her that someone within the bureau might have leaked her identity. "They're on to you," he said urgently. "Get out of there immediately." Before Sarah could respond, the line went dead. Panic surged through her veins. How had they found out? Who could she trust? That evening, as Sarah packed essentials for an emergency escape, there was a knock at her door. Peering through the peephole, she saw Mark and Ryan standing outside, their expressions unreadable. Her mind raced. Should she confront them? Try to bluff her way out? Or fight back? Taking a deep breath, she opened the door slightly, feigning confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Mark smiled coldly. "We need to talk, Sarah. Or, should I say Agent Parker?" For a split second, Sarah's world stopped. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. She had known this moment might come, but hearing it aloud was a blow she hadn't fully prepared for. Still, she refused to let fear take control. Summoning every ounce of strength, she straightened her posture and met Mark's gaze head-on. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said evenly, injecting just enough skepticism into her tone to sound convincing. Mark chuckled, darkly shaking his head. "Don't insult our intelligence, Sarah. Or should I call you Emily? We've known for weeks now. Your little act has been impressive, I'll give you that. But it ends tonight." Ryan stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the holster of a concealed weapon. "You've caused us a lot of trouble," he added, his voice low and menacing. "Now it's time to pay the price." Sarah's mind raced. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to eliminate her. She glanced around, calculating her options. Her car was parked in the driveway, but reaching it undetected would be nearly impossible. The house itself offered limited places to hide, and without backup, she was outnumbered and outgunned. Escape seemed unlikely, but surrender wasn't an option. Summoning her courage, Sarah spoke again, her voice calm but firm. "If you think killing me will solve your problems, you're wrong," she said. "The FBI already knows everything. You'll never walk away from this." For a moment, doubt flickered across Mark's face. Then Ryan laughed bitterly. "Nice try, but we're not stupid. We've covered our tracks. And once we deal with you, there won't be anyone left to testify against us." Before they could act, the sound of sirens pierced the night air. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows as police cars surrounded the house. Sarah exhaled, sharply, realizing Agent Harris must have tipped off local law enforcement. Mark cursed under his breath, grabbing Sarah roughly by the arm. "You're coming with us," he growled. A sudden crash came from the back door as SWAT teams breached the house. Chaos erupted. In the ensuing struggle, Sarah managed to break free, diving behind a couch as gunfire filled the room. When the dust settled, Mark and Ryan lay handcuffed on the floor, shouting obscenities. Sarah emerged shaken but alive, finally, able to breathe freely after months of living a lie. In the aftermath, the FBI dismantled the criminal network, thanks to Sarah's bravery and resourcefulness. Though relieved, she couldn't shake the weight of what she'd endured. As she packed her belongings to leave the neighborhood forever, she glanced one last time at the quiet street where she'd lived a double life. For better or worse, she had completed her mission, but the scars of her journey would remain long after she was gone. The night of the raid was a blur of chaos, noise, and adrenaline. Sarah stood frozen in her living room as SWAT teams stormed her house, shouting commands and securing Mark and Ryan on the floor. The sound of their handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the air like a final verdict, a judgment that justice had finally caught up with them. For months, Sarah had lived under the shadow of fear, knowing that one wrong move could cost her everything. Now surrounded by flashing lights and armed officers, she felt an overwhelming mix of relief and exhaustion. As agents led Mark and Ryan away, Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her body trembling from the surge of emotions coursing through her. She had spent countless nights wondering if she would survive this mission, if her cover would hold long enough to bring these criminals to justice. And now, here she was, alive, victorious, but far from unscathed. Her hands shook as she clutched a blanket around her shoulders, trying to steady herself. Despite the victory, something gnawed at her insides. This wasn't just about catching bad guys, it was about trust and betrayal. Agent Harris arrived shortly after the raid, his face lined with concern as he approached Sarah. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, crouching beside her. His voice was soft, almost fatherly, but Sarah barely registered his words. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying fragments of conversations, moments when she had doubted whether anyone truly had her back. Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for answers. "How did they find out?" she whispered hoarsely. "Who leaked my identity?" Harris hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the question. After a long pause, he sighed, heavily, and sat down beside her. "We don't know yet," he admitted, "but we're investigating. Someone inside the bureau tipped them off. That much is clear." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. A mole within the FBI? The thought was terrifying. If someone high up had betrayed her, then no one was safe, not even her own team. Trust was the foundation of every operation, especially undercover missions like hers. Without it, agents were left vulnerable, exposed to dangers they couldn't anticipate. And now, Sarah realized, she had been operating blind, unaware that the very organization meant to protect her might have put her life in jeopardy. Her handler's admission only deepened her sense of unease. As she processed what he had said, anger began to simmer beneath the surface. Anger at the betrayal, at the recklessness of whoever had compromised her safety, and at the system itself for failing her. She clenched her fists tightly, fighting back tears. "Do you have any idea what I've been through?" she demanded, her voice rising slightly. "I risked everything, for this agency, for this mission, and now I find out someone sold me out?" Harris placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, though his expression remained grim. "I understand your frustration, Sarah. Believe me, we're doing everything we can to track down the source of the leak. But right now, your priority needs to be getting out of here safely. This isn't over yet." Sarah nodded reluctantly, knowing he was right. Even with Mark and Ryan in custody, Their network was vast and deeply entrenched. Arresting two key players wouldn't dismantle the entire operation overnight. There were still loose ends to tie up, connections to sever, and evidence to gather. Until the case was fully closed, Sarah couldn't afford to let her guard down, even for a moment. Over the next few days, Sarah worked closely with the FBI to debrief and analyze the information she had collected during her time undercover. Every detail mattered, no matter how small. Phone numbers, email addresses, transaction records. It all added up to a larger picture of corruption that spanned multiple states and involved dozens of individuals. With each new discovery, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Despite the betrayal she had endured, she reminded herself why she had chosen this path in the first place: to serve justice, to protect innocent lives, and to ensure that people like Mark and Ryan never got away with their crimes again. But as the investigation progressed, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in the way her colleagues treated her. Some avoided eye contact altogether, while others spoke in hushed tones whenever she entered the room. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia left over from her time undercover. But the more she observed, the harder it became to ignore the growing sense of isolation. Was it possible that not everyone believed her story? Did some suspect she might have played a role in the leak herself? These doubts weighed heavily on her mind, compounding the stress of the past few months. Sleep became elusive, replaced by restless nights filled with fragmented dreams and haunting memories. She often found herself staring at the ceiling, replaying the events leading up to the raid. Had she missed something? Made a mistake that gave her away? Or worse, had someone close to her deliberately sabotaged her mission? Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah decided to dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding the leak. Using her access to classified files, she cross-referenced communication logs, financial records, and personnel files, looking for anything unusual. It was risky. She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the answers lay hidden somewhere within the data. Her efforts paid off when she stumbled upon a series of encrypted messages exchanged between an unknown sender and a burner phone linked to Mark Dawson. The content of the messages was vague, but one phrase stood out: "The agent is compromised." Whoever sent those messages had intimate knowledge of the FBI's operations, including Sarah's true identity. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Someone within the Bureau had deliberately fed information to Mark and Ryan, setting her up for failure or worse. Fueled by a mix of anger and determination, Sarah brought her findings to Agent Harris. He listened intently, his brow furrowed as he absorbed the implications. When she finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. "This is bigger than we thought," he muttered. "If there's a mole this high up, it means the entire department is compromised." Sarah nodded grimly. "Which means I'm not the only one in danger. Whoever did this has access to sensitive information about other agents, other missions. We need to act fast before they strike again." Harris agreed, promising to escalate the matter to higher authorities. In the meantime, he urged Sarah to lay low and avoid drawing attention to herself. "You've done enough," he said firmly. "Let us handle the rest." Reluctantly, Sarah complied. She retreated to a safe house provided by the FBI, where she spent her days reviewing case files and strategizing ways to strengthen the investigation. Though physically removed from the action, her mind remained hyper-focused on the task at hand. Every clue, every lead, and every potential connection fueled her resolve to expose the traitor once and for all. Yet, even in the safety of the secure location, Sarah couldn't escape the lingering effects of her ordeal. Flashbacks of tense encounters with Mark and Ryan haunted her waking hours, while nightmares disrupted her sleep. She tried to distract herself with routine tasks, cooking, reading, journaling, but nothing seemed to quiet the storm raging inside her. The weight of her experiences bore down on her, leaving her feeling isolated and emotionally drained. One evening, as she sat alone in the dimly lit living room of the safe house, Sarah received an unexpected visit from Agent Harris. He carried a folder under his arm, his expression grave as he joined her on the couch. "We've identified the source of the leak," he said quietly, handing her the folder. Sarah opened it cautiously, scanning the contents. What she found shocked her to her core. The name listed as the suspected mole belonged to someone she had trusted implicitly, someone who had been part of her support system from the beginning. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stared at the damning evidence, her heart breaking with each passing second. How could this happen? How could someone she relied on betray her so completely? Harris placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know this is hard to hear," he said softly, "but remember, you're not alone in this fight. We'll make sure justice is served, not just for you, but for everyone affected by this betrayal." Sarah nodded numbly, clutching the folder tightly. Justice, she thought bitterly. Would it ever truly make things right? Or would the scars of this experience linger forever, shaping her future in ways she couldn't yet imagine? Only time would tell. For now, all she could do was take solace in the fact that she had survived and that she still had work to do. The days that followed the revelation of the mole were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. The name in the folder had shaken her to her core. It belonged to Agent Laura Bennett, one of the senior members of the FBI team and someone Sarah had trusted implicitly. Laura had been her go-to person during the early stages of the mission, offering guidance, reassurance, and tactical advice whenever Sarah felt overwhelmed. To discover that Laura had betrayed her was like finding out a close friend had stabbed her in the back. At first, Sarah couldn't process it. She replayed memories of their conversation, searching for signs she might have missed, subtle hints or red flags that could have warned her about Laura's true intentions. But there was nothing. Laura had always seemed genuine, supportive, and professional. How could someone so deeply embedded in the system turn against it? And why? Agent Harris assured Sarah that an internal investigation was already underway. "We'll get to the bottom of this," he promised, his voice firm but tinged with regret. "But you need to focus on yourself right now. You've been through enough." Yet focusing on herself felt impossible. The betrayal gnawed at her, eroding the trust she once had in others and even in herself. Was she too naive? Too quick to believe people? Or was this simply the cost of working undercover, where loyalty was a fragile concept and deception lurked around every corner? Despite her turmoil, Sarah knew she couldn't let the betrayal derail her mission. The case against Mark Dawson and his network was still ongoing, and her testimony would play a crucial role in securing convictions. So, she pushed aside her personal pain and prepared to face the aftermath head-on. The trial began weeks later, held in a federal courthouse, surrounded by tight security. Mark, Ryan, and several other key players from the criminal network sat in handcuffs, their arrogant smirks replaced by grim expressions as prosecutors presented damning evidence linking them to illegal arms trafficking, money laundering, and corruption. Sarah's contributions were pivotal. The photos she had taken, the documents she had uncovered, and the details she had memorized over months of undercover work formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. When it came time for Sarah to testify, she walked into the courtroom with steady steps, her face composed despite the storm raging inside her. Dressed in a simple black suit, she looked every bit the professional agent she was trained to be. As she took the stand, all eyes turned to her, including those of Mark and Ryan, who glared at her with barely concealed hatred. Under questioning, Sarah recounted her experiences step by step, describing how she had infiltrated the network, gained their trust, and gathered evidence of their crimes. Her voice remained calm and measured, betraying none of the fear or anger she felt toward the men sitting just feet away from her. When asked about the risks she had taken, she paused briefly before responding, "I did what I had to do to protect innocent lives. That's my job." Her words resonated throughout the courtroom, earning nods of approval from the jury and spectators. Even Mark and Ryan seemed momentarily stunned by her composure, though they quickly masked their surprise with sneers. Still, Sarah noticed a flicker of doubt in their eyes, as if they were finally realizing the extent of their downfall. As the trial progressed, the weight of the evidence became undeniable. Witness testimonies, financial records, intercepted, Communications and physical proof all pointed to the same conclusion. Mark Dawson's operation was a sophisticated criminal enterprise responsible for untold harm. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the verdict felt almost inevitable. When the jury returned with guilty verdicts for Mark, Ryan, and several co-conspirators, a wave of relief washed over Sarah. It wasn't just a victory for her, it was a triumph for justice itself. For months she had carried the burden of knowing the truth, of seeing the darkness hidden beneath the surface of her quiet little town. Now, that darkness had been exposed, and its architects would pay the price. But the victory came at a cost. Back at the safe house, Sarah found herself struggling to adjust to life after the mission. The adrenaline rush of undercover work had faded, leaving behind an emptiness she hadn't anticipated. She spent hours staring out the window, watching the world move on without her. Neighbors went about their routines. Children played in the streets and cars passed by as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet Sarah knew better. Beneath the surface, scars remained, scars that wouldn't heal anytime soon. She also couldn't escape the lingering questions about Laura Bennett. Why had Laura betrayed her? What motivated her to jeopardize not only Sarah's life, but the integrity of the entire operation? These unanswered questions haunted Sarah, keeping her awake at night and fueling her distrust of those around her. One evening, Agent Harris visited the safe house with news that offered some closure. Laura confessed, he said, handing Sarah a transcript of the interrogation. According to the document, Laura had been coerced into leaking information after Mark's network threatened her family. They had dug up secrets from her past, financial troubles, mistakes made early in her career, and used them as leverage to force her cooperation. Faced with no other options, Laura had complied, hoping to protect her loved ones. Reading the transcript, Sarah felt a strange mix of anger and pity. On one hand, Laura's actions had endangered countless lives, including her own. On the other hand, she understood the desperation of being backed into a corner, of having to choose between your principles and the safety of those you cared about. It didn't excuse what Laura had done, but it humanized her in a way Sarah hadn't expected. "I don't know if I can forgive her," Sarah admitted to Harris, her voice trembling. "But I understand why she did it." Harris nodded sympathetically. "Forgiveness isn't something you have to rush. Take your time, focus on healing." In the weeks that followed, Sarah began taking small steps toward rebuilding her life. She started therapy, pouring out her fears and frustrations to someone who could help her make sense of them. She reconnected with old friends outside the EI bureau, reminding herself that not everyone was untrustworthy. And she allowed herself moments of peace, sitting quietly in her garden or taking long walks in the park. Eventually, Sarah decided to leave the neighborhood where she had lived undercover. The memories were too vivid, the reminders too constant. Before packing her belongings, she took one last walk down the street, savoring the simplicity of the place she had called home, even if it had only been an illusion. As she stood on the sidewalk, looking at the houses bathed in golden sunlight, she realized something important. She had survived. Against all odds, she had faced danger, betrayal, and heartache, and come out stronger on the other side. Though the scars of her journey would remain, Sarah vowed never to let them define her. She had dedicated her life to serving justice, and she refused to let anyone or anything take that away from her. With renewed determination, she climbed into her car, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As she drove away, the town faded into the distance, becoming just another chapter in her story. A difficult chapter, yes, but not the final one. For Sarah Parker, or Emily Hayes, or whoever she chose to be next, the road forward stretched endlessly, filled with possibilities, challenges, and hope.